Hello and welcome to the Curiosity and Consciousness podcast. The intention of this podcast is to open your mind, get curious about yourself and connect to the power you hold within. I am your host, Karen Maloney, an inside-out coach, helping you to believe in yourself and manifest your desires. Check out the podcast, available on all platforms, and go to my website, www.karenmaloney.com for all info. Welcome everybody. Happy Thursday. Thanks for joining for another episode. And this week my guest is Andrea Donnelly. And Andrea is a sought after media personality, spiritual mentor, quantum sound and energy healer, and founder of We Are Here to Remember. With over 20 years of experience in all things energy, she uses light energy, speed codes, and the Akashic Records to clear intergenerational trauma, illness and pain so that her clients can align with their highest timeline and new levels of clarity, success and abundance. She's been featured in prestigious publications like Thrive Global, Yahoo, Bustle and Medium. When she's not doing media interviews or serving her clients, you can find her mothering her 2 cat children, many plants and neighborhood birds and squirrels, working on her tap dance heavy spiritual comedy routine and dreaming up a better world for all of us. And with this episode with Andrea, she shares how she's been on a metaphysical journey since she was born, and she's always remembered the truth of who we are and where we come from in the bigger picture. She's also spoken light language since she was a baby, and although she suffered much trauma in her lifetime, which she called was like an Olympic training ground, she has found a way to stay grounded in joy and keep her heart open. And she talks about how trauma helps us to remember who we are. And the more that we crack open our heart, the more light can spill in. So she talks about light language in this episode, what light language is, and she also shares a beautiful healing and channeling at the end of this conversation, which is light language and which helps us to step into our own power. She talks about how we're in an age of disinformation and how anyone who may think outside the box may be thought of as crazy, but they're not crazy and magic does exist. She also talks about intuition and how we need to clear out our baggage, so to speak, so we can hear our inner voice. So lots of information in this episode, and you can go to her website, which is weareheretoremember.com, and that's we are here, the number 2, remember.com. And on that as well, she has a free gift of an ancestral light language healing as well for anyone who signs up to her mailing list. And again, just a final reminder for anyone who would like to join the beta version of my online course, which is all about inner transformation, aligning to your highest truth, releasing what no longer serves you, and creating life on your terms, drop me an email, support@karenmaloney.com, and I will be sharing the beta version with some of you. So enjoy this episode, and as always, I will have all links to Andrea's work on my website, karenmaloney.com, and click the podcast section. Enjoy! Welcome everybody, and thanks for tuning in again. And Andrea Donnelly, thanks as well for joining today. And I'm sure we're going to have a really interesting and insightful conversation as well. But first of all, thanks for sharing your time with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me and just for offering this platform of beautiful, illuminated information for the planet. So thank you.
And as we heard there in your bio as well, you do lots of incredible work and have lots of different tools and skills under your belt. But maybe if you just introduce yourself a little bit first and help us to get to know some of your background a little bit more.
Sure, thank you. So I am a quantum sound and energy healer, and I have been on a metaphysical journey since I was born. And I was born remembering a lot of things that other people forget as part of the process of just like incarnating into human form. I have been a clear channel since I have memories. I spoke light language when I was little, like a small kid, I used it to communicate with animals and with plants and with nature. And I have talked to my guides since I was a baby. I channel the light of the ascended masters. I basically, my guides always say that I basically just like channel all the good vibes. So the angels, the fairies, the earth wisdom, the ascended masters, tons of galactic light. Like I am a channel of joy, and I have lived through a lot of really wacky trauma. But it was all part of what my guides told me when I was very small was going to be essentially an Olympic training ground to be able to hold multiple perspectives, to be able to stay grounded in joy, no matter what was happening around me. And they told me from the time I was very little that I was going to do something that was going to really shift things for the planet, and that I just needed to essentially just like keep my heart as light as a feather, which is easier said than done, perhaps in human form, but that there was going to come a point where every single thing that I had ever experienced was going to all make sense, and that it was going to be at around the age that I am now. I'm 43. I learned how to meditate when I was 17, and I realized when I learned how to meditate that I had always really been meditating from the time I had been a kid. So it's been a long journey, and I essentially synthesized years of metaphysical study, energy healing, sound healing, all kinds of different modalities into something very uniquely my own that I used to heal myself, and I now use with my clients because I'm a master manifester. And so even though I lived through all of that trauma, I also always was heavily protected and like literally lived under a lucky star, which is also part of that whole like learning to live in duality experience for me of being able to hold those multiple perspectives. So that was long-winded, but that
that was fascinating. There's so many questions I want to ask, and maybe one of them, just since, because it's funny, you're the second person I've connected to recently in these last couple of months who said that they never forgot since birth the truth of where they came from and that. And what is the higher truth, or what's your understanding or knowing of the higher truth from having that connection since birth and not forgetting and having all your guides and that and all these galactic energies? What is the truth of us, if we can truly answer it?
The real, right. Can that ever be really answered? But I have spent, so I've spent years trying to unwrap the whole point of all of this. And I often say that I really believe that the idea of enlightenment is literally just being able to hold multiple perspectives on this planet and be able to look at everything that happens as an opportunity to move through things in a way that move within for us. So like my guides have always told me our trauma is our gold. Our trauma catalyzes us to remember in full totality who we are, because the more you basically crack your heart open, the more room it makes for light to pour in, and for you to also have a lot of compassion, not just for yourself, but for the world around you. So that's what I sort of perceive to be the big point in all of this.
That's amazing. And then how do you help a person as well who doesn't have this connection maybe, and who is going through many different traumas and experiences? How do you help them as well to, one, connect to that higher perspective and have a perspective that actually this may be a catalyst for good, and two, to stay grounded in that joy, as you mentioned earlier?
Well, it's so interesting. Like yesterday I worked with, I had a couple client calls, and one of the things about me is that because I can hear both my own guidance so clearly, and I am psychic in like all the ways. I hear information, I see information, I know information. Like I just experience the world in this really big, like quantum way. I've always been able to just get very quickly into the quantum field. One of the things that ends up happening is that when I work with a client, like yesterday, I had a new client who was asking me about her guides, and I saw this very clear image of her playing the harp. And I asked her, I said, do you play any instruments? And she was like, oh, this is so interesting because I played the keyboard for a long time as a child, and I keep getting a hit that I need to start doing something that is more, that's musical again. And I was like, well, I just saw you playing the harp. Like, very clearly I saw you playing the harp, which is not right. Like, who's
Yeah, yeah,
playing the harp?
yeah.
But I was like, see you playing the harp. So I think there's something there. And then her eyes got really wide and she was like, the harp. She was like, I was just reading a book about angels the other day, and I got a very clear hit that I need to learn how to play the harp, that I don't need to be playing the keyboard anymore. And I was like, well, there it is. Like I think that because I can hear people's guidance so clearly, it makes people feel really comfortable with me because I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know about
Yeah.
themselves. But I think that there's so much power in the fact, like, I can see the trauma people's experience, but I also have always been able, and this has been what has literally held me through all of this. I can also see people's original soul blueprint, and I can see what they're capable of. So it has made me always be very generous and forgiving with people. Even when I had people in my life who were like very messy and like not showing up in the way that they could, I was always able to see what people could do. And that has made it so that I have always it has provided me with like a perpetual level of optimism, basically.
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah. I love that. And in one sense, I can relate to that, and especially in previous relationships, but also I had it to the detriment of my own self, as in I wasn't truly connected to myself as well. And I ended up getting really hurt maybe because I stayed in a situation. Well,
Yeah.
I won't change any of it. It was all perfect, but I stayed in a situation for way too long, knowing that I should have left because I lived in that hope of, I know this is not their true self. I know they're capable of so much more. I know they might come back to how they were meant to be. So how do you help people as well to navigate that, to have healthy boundaries, to know when it's kind of time to walk away as well?
Yeah, and that is also such a huge theme in my work, right? Is that I end up really attracting a lot of like fascinating visionaries, people who are often already very successful in a lot of ways and just want to really tap into the energetic part of ascension and acceleration, and just call in more of the joy and more of the love. And it is complicated because when you are a visionary, when you are an empath, when you are someone who was born remembering things, being psychically sensitive, like you were just talking about, being able to like see the divine truth in someone who maybe wasn't doing what they needed to for you or for the world or for themselves, certainly. And so also one of my journeys and one of the things that I work with people, this is so like cheesy and it sounds so Hallmark cardy, but I always say to people, when you're saying yes to someone else, make sure you're never saying no to you. And I saw that years ago, like it was a meme that I saw like 10 years ago, and I've never forgotten the languaging of it because there's something so powerful about that. And I think that's like the real journey for all of us, you, me, and everyone who is really intuitive and psychically sensitive, is to be able to be like, okay, yes. And again, it all ties back into that idea of being able to hold the multiple perspectives, because you can still love a person, but starting to realize that we can no longer sacrifice our own needs for anyone else.
Yeah, that's so funny you say that, because that's exactly the lesson I came to learn as well. I was like, oh, hang on, I can love as many people and share so much love, but I actually cannot put the love of another or anyone or anything above the love for myself, because like that,
Yeah,
I ended up just truly hurting myself more than anything. But again, it was such a being willing to go with it and do the work. There are many gifts, and that's part of the work as well. And I just want to skip back for a moment as well, because I'm so
sure.
fascinated. And what exactly is light language?
Oh gosh, I love light language so much. So light language is a way of channeling straight from source in a way that transcends human language. Human language is so powerful and beautiful. And like, I'm so glad it exists so we can all communicate with each other. But light language operates like outside of time and outside of the sort of limitations of human experience. I facilitated quantum sound and energy healing at a retreat a couple of weeks ago, and I channeled a lot of light language as part of the process. It was so interesting because one of my clients was there and she was like, I can't, and she's a doctor. She's she's a hyper magical person, but she's also a very like logical, linear person. And after it was over, she was like, that was so surreal because I was literally responding to you in my own brain. And what were you even saying?
Yeah.
And I see that like there is and this is also funny because I always, right? Because I would speak it as it were when I was a little kid, I remember knowing that it was something and I called it in my own brain like elegant gibberish or like a Muppet language. Like I literally was like, I don't know what this is, but I know that it's meaningful because there were a couple of wild times in my childhood where like we were in Florida once on a vacation and there was an egret that had gotten injured in a park that had a hook in its eye from some like something. And the rangers were trying to calm the bird down and get it off to a wildlife vet. And my family knew that I was a real animal whisperer. And they were like, and I like nudged, I was with my grandmother and my mom and my siblings. And I was like, I think I can help. I was in like third grade and they were like, sure. They were like, well,
Off you go.
they like went over to the rangers and they were like, she's really good with animals. She thinks maybe she can help or whatever. And I remember, Karen, I walked over to the bird and I literally like started just whispering light language. And I was like, it's okay. They're just trying to help you. Like I knew what I was saying in my mind. And then like, that was what was coming through, and it was coming through as light language. And the bird literally let me wrap my arms around it. And everyone was just like, what on earth? Like, what is going on over there? But also awesome. Great. We're going to go get this bird off to the vet. And I had also announced as a child at a much younger age, I was like 4, but I was in a park in Worcester, Mass, where I grew up. And I told my mom and one of my aunts that I was going to go catch a pigeon. And they were like, uh-huh. And I came back and I had a pigeon in my hands and they were like, her go right now. What is going? How did you do that? Like, what is happening? And I was like, well, I just like told the bird that I wanted to pick it up. I was like, like what, just like speaking my light language, which for me, it's my primary language. So I can speak it anytime. I have seen the way that it, my guides always tell me that it is one of the most potent medicines or like forming healing transmutation devices, however you want to phrase that we have at this time, because it moves so fast. And I have seen people use the light language that I channel and literally have things happen, like have nerve pain or heartache or other really big actual physical things literally just dissolve because they listened to light language that I had channeled.
Wow. And so are you conscious of what's coming through, or it's just a total energy and frequency that you're just kind of moving? Like there's no kind of alphabet or set words, but there's not. Yeah, I don't know. I just find it so fascinating.
Yeah. So I can always feel the frequency of what, like, I always know what the sort of meta intention is.
Yeah.
And I know while I'm speaking it, what it is that I am looking to articulate. And it's so interesting because I've had other people who were light language channels listen to the thing that I channel. And then I've also had the same thing happen with me where I've been like, oh, I know that dialect. Like that's one of the ones that like you can hear. I can always pick up on like the similarities of the frequencies and the overlap. And it's just amazing. Like I do these things called personalized light language channels for people, where people can either do like dealer's choice, where they just have me go into their records and work with their guides, and basically their team shows me what will serve them the most. Or people can be like, here's what I'm going through, like this is what I would like the light language to address. And it's really, really wild, because especially when people do the dealer's choice option, where they're like, just give me what comes through, it always, people's guides will be like, okay, so this person like is working on X, Y, and Z, and this is what they need to have this hold space for in terms of their own development. And dollars for donuts, every time people are like, that's exactly what what I'm going through right now and what I needed to have support with.
That's amazing. It's fascinating. And, thank you for sharing all that. And maybe towards the end, if you feel like it, you might share a little light message if anything comes through for all of us and all listeners.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
That would be beautiful. Thank you so much. And I feel like I went off on a tangent there for a moment, but I was just so fascinated. And I don't think I've connected with someone really yet on light language. So they were some of my own personal curiosities. But then also as well, how do you help people to really step into their own inner knowing and power and connect to the higher truth of themselves as well, and kind of the collective and the consciousness, so that it can support them in their own journey as well?
Well, I think one thing that's so interesting, and right, what a powerful time for you and I to be having this conversation, because just of everything that's been happening in the world. And there is this really big disinformation campaign that comes from every system that exists on this planet: politics, education, religion, culture, all of the big, all of our systems of governance tell us over and over and over again that magic is not real. But when you actually look at what is happening from a broader perspective, if you start to do your own research and you start to dig around a little, it actually turns out that even though our systems are all telling us that magic isn't real, all of those same systems use magic to literally benefit from this essentially misinformation. And it is a benefit to the systems and the powers that were in charge for a long time on this planet to engage in that narrative, because it made it so that the vast majority of people were so disconnected from the truth of who they were that they believe it because we hear it all the time. And so I think that one of the most powerful ways that I help people is by essentially just reiterating what people have already been hearing from their team their entire life. And one of the things that people always say to me is that most people who end up working with me say, I've never had anyone see me so clearly. And I end up telling people these, like, I know, I just will, like, people's guides will tell me these hyper specific things about them. And I'm just like, so I'm like seeing this and I'm being told this is the thing that you need to work on. And when people start to just remember that they're not crazy, basically, right? Because that's the thing, is that we've been told that if you are a magical person, if you are a psychic, that you're crazy, or it's the devil's work, or like whatever all of the things are that we've all been told about what it means to actually tap into your intuition. But then you look at something like, churches, right? They're out there, they're shaking wands of incense. They're literally reciting incantations. People are being handed, quote unquote, the body and the blood of Christ. Like, that's magic right there. And so if they're going to be using magic to their own advantage while telling people that magic isn't real, the big wake-up call for the world, as far as I'm concerned, is to start to be able to really tap into that inner knowing and be like, all right, we can all say anything we want, but how do we embody the truth of what we speak? Because if people are telling us one thing and then they're behaving in a radically different way, we saw that so much in the past couple of years, right? With we would say, how many politicians in my country would be out there telling everybody that they needed to be doing this thing or the other thing or that thing. And then they were literally getting caught on camera doing the exact opposite of what they were telling all the rest of us to do. So I think that for me, the big thing that I end up really doing for people is that I hold this incredible space so that they just start to trust themselves and the things that they always knew to be true about who they were in a much bigger way.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it's all about at the end of the day as well. And just trusting ourselves. And for me as well, it's kind of part of the experience. You won't know until you start trusting and seeing what unfolds and how it unfolds to actually know the truth of it or how supportive it is to someone as well. And yeah, that whole idea of you're not crazy, like, never mind if people were psychic and doing whatever intergalactic things they might be doing and incredibleness. It was even just general, any kind of outside of the box thinking and a little bit different. It was like, oh, don't do that. That's not the way kind of thing. So yeah, definitely interesting times. And I know you do energy forecasts and that as well. So what do you see as what we're going through now and where we're going as a collective and a species?
I have always really believed and held a lot of space for, and my guides always told me that we were going to hit a point in human history where the spiritual gifts that I was born remembering were going to literally be the most potent form of currency that existed. And so I think that we are in this really, really, really massive moment of transformation that was foretold by, I mean, when you go back and you start to look at like records of sages and seers and saints and religions across the world and like all kinds of mystics and indigenous peoples all said that this was going to be a time that has literally never existed on the planet before, and that we were going to move into something bigger and more beautiful than anything any of us could have like possibly imagined. And it's been rocky, right? It's been messy. I did my energy forecast for September a couple of days ago. And, my guys really just hit home again that, especially as we're moving into next year, that really trusting what you know to be true and getting as much support as you possibly can to fine tune and clear out any of the baggage that essentially makes it so that you can't hear your own guidance. So, right, we inherit things from our ancestors. We have past life stuff. We have all kinds of things that have happened to us. And it amounts to what I always sort of think of and call like a bag of rocks that we're carrying around with us. And the more we can lighten that load, the more that we can clear out our shame and our grief and our traumas and really, really just like lovingly, with gratitude, acknowledging that those things did happen within for us, but that we don't need to always be like trapped in that cycle. The more you can clear those things from an energetic perspective, it opens up all this room and you literally start to be able to hear your own guidance in this really remarkable, much more clear way. And it happens very quickly. Like that's one of the things about my modality that's so amazing is that when I start working with people, the transformations happen so fast and wild things happen. Like I had a client who started working with me a couple of years ago. Now she is just a remarkable human. She is an entrepreneur. She is one of the most magnetic people I've ever met. But it was incredible to watch her journey because she started working with me because she wanted to ground into 6-figure months in her business. Mm-hmm. And we did it. We worked with each other one-on-one for, like a year, maybe a year and a half. And it was unbelievable to watch the process and to do that work with her, to hold space with her. And that's one of the things I see over and over again is that when people show up and do the work and take these really big, quote unquote, leaps of faith, it ends up really opening you up to quantum leaps and to moving at the speed of light. And years ago, something like a 20-year-long inner child journey was like what we had access to. But we can move a lot faster now in this way that we can compress time and space, and we can really choose to make massive, fast leaps if we really lean in and we start to just acknowledge that we are the ones who are the creators of the experience, right? Like Dolores Cannon talks about how like we are the producer and the director and the person mopping the stage at the end of the show. Like we're literally doing all of it. So if you start to realize that that is the point from which your life unfolds, and that we're all creating all the time anyway. So like, why not have it be done in a much more conscious way that works with and for us?
Absolutely. 1,000,000%. And that's what I always say as well. I'm like, we are creators. We are creating 24/7. It's not something we need to learn how to do. We're already doing it, but it's the act of being intentional and conscious. And like you say, clearing the baggage so we can create easily, quicker, and those things that we do want. And even just to touch on the quantum for a moment, and the capacity that we have to make major shifts in our lives.
Yeah, the quantum field is so wild. I remember once years ago, I was in my early 20s, and I had at this point been meditating for a few, consciously meditating for a few years. I had learned how to I had had my first and second Reiki attunement, and I had really I had already been like really deep diving into this like surreal space. And I also, had all of these experiences growing up, and, the communication with my guides. And I remember once saying to my stepfather, I was talking to him about, I was like, that moment when you're like quiet with yourself and you just start to like literally feel like the experience of the universe, and like that God is just running through you. I don't, something to that effect. And I was like, like, that's why I love meditating, basically. And he looked at me just kind of like incredulously, and he was like, I don't know what you mean, and I have never felt that way. And so there was this like, because I have always been able to get into that field so quickly, like I can actually see it, I can feel it, I know that it exists because of what I have seen and experienced to be true in my own life. And when we can tap into that, like when I did that retreat a couple of weeks ago, one of the people we were sharing after my healing, and one of the people who was a participant at the retreat was like, that was one of the wildest things I've ever experienced. And she started talking about how she basically had this like really wild experience of being like the all-seeing eye, and essentially like existing in like the middle of just this like really powerful quantum field. And she talked about like all of these things that she saw. And I was like, you went into the point of creation. She was amazed because she was like, I don't think I've ever gotten to that space so quickly. And so I know that there is this way that like my own voice is literally a trigger for people to be able to get back to that place so quickly. And it's the point from which we create. And so if you can get to that point really quickly, then you start to be able to be like, wow, I can do anything.
Yeah. The truth as well. Every potentiality exists. But again, as you mentioned, we are the directors, we are the actors. And if we're not consciously doing it, it's not going to happen. So fascinating. And just before we get to our light language sharing, and you've shared about meditation as well, but are there any other practical steps that people can take away with them, to connect more to that inner stillness, that quiet, and that magic as well?
Yeah, I think that really finding a way, right? Meditation is super powerful. I love it. Breath work is really powerful. All kinds of different energy healing modalities are so powerful. And I think one of the things that people, especially when people are at the beginning of their journey, it seems to me like a lot of people get sort of caught up in, comparing themselves to other people. B, getting kind of caught up in like what they think they should be doing. So like meditation is beautiful. It works for a lot of people, but for a lot of people, maybe that sort of traditional thing of like sitting quietly immediately, like maybe that doesn't work for you. And so maybe what you need to do is something a little different. Maybe you need to do like a walking meditation, or, learn how to paint or cook or like play tennis or something. Like there are so many different ways. Every one of us is so different. And so I think that sometimes people get stressed out by the process of being like, ooh, I tried to do this thing and it's like not my thing and I don't like it. And so like, I'm not
I'm
spiritual and I'm
failing.
just
There's
going to
nothing else.
I'm failing. I'm
There's
getting an
no
F
other
and I'm
way.
just going to, there's no other way. And I'm going to give up. And it's like, well, again, to go back to that idea of holding multiple perspectives, what if instead of like making yourself a failure or judging yourself, you say, oh, okay, this is actually like literally just a fun experiment for me to remember who I am. So maybe it's not that I'm wrong or a dummy or bad at everything because I can't get into the zone when I meditate. Maybe I just need to figure out what my perfect practice is that aligns with who I am.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, because there's 1,000,001 different ways. And again, it's that
That's right.
willingness to play and explore and be curious and to try them out. The same when I work with clients, I'm like, I'm not going to know and you're not going to know what actually you prefer and really helps you much quicker to get into that place unless you go play and explore and try them out. Action, it's the only way to know for sure. What a beautiful conversation. I really, really enjoyed it. And like that, if there's anything that you feel you would still like to share, please do. And we'll come to sharing your website as well afterwards. But then also, yes, if you would like to channel some light language for us all on our journeys as well, myself and all the listeners, that would be beautiful.
I would love to do that. Thank you. All right. So what I'm going to recommend to everyone listening is if you are doing something like driving, come back to this. But if you certainly you can listen, but just be aware of the fact that it can really have a very powerful impact. So I recommend listening to this when you can just be like quiet and like chillaxed, basically. Close your eyes, put your hands on your heart if you can, or just do whatever will like make you feel comfortable, but really just to drink it in, no matter how silly it might feel. And what my guides are saying is that this is, they're showing me like a sea of people like just claiming their uniqueness and their beauty and your singular point of magic and literally the song you were meant to sing. There was a quote from a movie years ago about letting your freak flag fly. And this is literally to help everyone listening to just shamelessly claim who they are with no judgment.
Epic.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Oranga baranga na ranga manna garanga stangala laga barstamagbala. Oranga binara langaran momana garnango stamangara baranga basta garshbarba. Oranga mai mangaro langam bastangaro na. Aranga mani barangamba. I am love, I am love, I am love. Angawarun and Gabash and Gabalaran and Gabamaran and Gabaran and Gabashtangaranim and Garlanga Barang. Orangabanim and Garlanga Labashtan and Gabaranka Barshtan Gabaran. I'm Maralim and Barsta. Take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And on the exhale, let go of all of the ways that you have shamed yourself and made yourself small to fit into this world, trying to make yourself fit into a mold and just allow your unique song, the song you were born to sing, that if you do not sing loudly and proudly and shouting your truth from the rooftops, there is no one else who can do that because you are magic. Arangaba, arangashta, arangabala, arangabachaparana. It is so, it is so, it is so.
Oh my God, that was beautiful. And what a beautiful imagery as well you just mentioned beforehand. And I felt this energy of like fuck yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
rising
right?
up, rising up. Yeah. But
Right? I love that idea of like rising up, because that's the thing that I think we all forget, Karen. And there was like those memes that I loved in the past couple of years, that idea of like become ungovernable. And it's like, that's what, like, we have the capacity. We could all wake up tomorrow and this planet could be radically different than it was today. And all it takes is for us to literally step into the truth of who we are and be like, I'm not going to let anyone, my family, the world, political systems, who even all the noise that comes from so many different directions, I'm not listening to it anymore, because I am divine. I am beautiful, and I am truly unstoppable once I step into the truth of who I am. And that is, yeah, I feel like that's really my greatest gift, is that I help people to really anchor into that frequency of the truth of themselves.
yeah. Thank you so
Yeah, you are
so
so
much for
welcome.
sharing that. Please just share as well, where people can find out more about your work. And as always, I will link everything as well from the show notes on my website.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. I feel that the best way for people to get in touch with me and to really step into my world is if you go to my website, which is weareheretoremember.com. It's spelled out, and then it's the number 2. If you go to my website, you scroll to the bottom, you can sign up for my newsletter. And when you do that, you get this profoundly powerful light language healing that I channeled a couple of years ago. And it's an ancestral healing. It helps to clear out patterns that no longer align with who you are and where you're going. It's only 42 seconds long, but the things that happen when people listen to it are so profound and beautiful. And you also end up getting a discount on a new client session with me as part of that. And I also have a 6-month journey called Angelic Alchemy Academy. And I have a couple of spots right now for one-on-one work with me. So I just encourage everyone to really reach out and find me, follow me in all the places. And I am so grateful to you for speaking your truth and for sharing this platform with people. This is, oh gosh, I feel emotional saying this, but it's such a crazy time to be alive right now. But what a powerful, magical time, like for me especially, because I was always told this time was coming. And to be able to actually witness it, and to be able to see people like you and people like me who are just out there, like shining our light and being a real source of illumination and love for the planet. It's exactly what I was always told was going to happen. And to be able to actually live it is really something. It's a treasure, and it's a gift.
It is. And I just got goosebumps when you said that as well. And, I see it happening as well. There's so many of us. There's so many of us, even in day-to-day life. And that's why it's always worth doing the inner work to connect that truth for ourselves as well, because it's everything. And it does support ourselves, but also into the collective as well. So thank you so much for sharing that as well, and for helping us remember all these little things again. Because, in life as well, we forget often as well at times, and we're caught in the humdrum and the mayhem. So that's the consciousness, and that's the persistence and the dedication on our part as well to remember to keep tapped in. So thank you so much. A pleasure, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks for listening. And before you go, I would love to ask you a massive favor. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode of the podcast, I would love for you to leave a short review on Apple Podcasts to help it grow. If you could do that, I would greatly appreciate it.